No greater way to celebrate Grandparents' Day than the way my wife and I celebrated Grandparents' Day. We dropped the two boys off at their house last night, and they are bringing the boys to second service, fed, dressed, bathed, maybe some new clothes, all the things. Way to go, grandparents. I want to echo what Pastor Kevin said, and I'll mention more at the end of my message. Grandparents make such a big difference. Our parents prayed for years for us to have children. My wife's grandparents and my grandparents were godly heritage for us growing up as children. My wife remembers when she was little, her grandfather a lot of times would babysit and watch them. I spent a lot of afternoons at my grandparents' house. Grandparents, we thank you so much for all that you do. Today's a fitting day for the message I'll be sharing. I'm going to begin a new series called Masterpiece in Progress, where we're going to take a look at Ephesians chapter 5, verse by verse, and really Paul's emphasis. We've been going literally verse by verse through this long letter that Paul wrote to the church at Ephesus, the only letter in the New Testament written to a church not to address a specific problem. Congratulations, Ephesus. You didn't have a bunch of adultery, a bunch of affairs, a bunch of lying, a bunch of stealing, but you had some things to work out still. And so Paul has been going progressively from this idea of worshiping and adoring God, sitting in his presence, walking out our faith, as we'll see this morning, and he'll close out Ephesians chapter 6 with this idea of standing for what matters. And this morning we're going to focus on one particular topic in the book of Ephesians, and that's love. And I can think of no greater topic for us to address on Grandparents' Day because you guys know how much the love of a grandparent means. If you were raised by parents who were around grandparents, if you had grandparents nearby, you know that love. Some of you are grandparents and you know the love for your grandchildren and how special it is. And in Ephesians chapter 5, Paul is going to use the language of love to build a foundation upon which we will build this masterpiece. Actually, this masterpiece will be built into us. But here's the problem. Most of us have a pretty crummy relationship with love. At some point, a parent, somebody we loved, a grandparent, an uncle, an aunt, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, an estranged spouse, someone who said they loved us or someone who should have loved us, let us down. And so our interpretation of love, our idea of love, it's broken, it's shattered. And then we do all that we can to seek out love, often in all the wrong places and in all the wrong ways. There is this progression that is supposed to naturally happen with love. And it works like this. In a good, healthy home, you are raised in a loving environment where you receive the love of a mother, you receive the love of a father, you receive even the love of your grandparents. I know that's not everyone's story. Like many of you, I did not grow up with a father in the home. Fortunately, I had uncles step into that gap. I had a grandfather who stepped into that gap. I did receive the love of my mother, and as we get older, we're supposed to move from just receiving that love to offering that love to those very people. Before you knew you were loved, you were loved. When you were in diapers, somebody loved you. But as you get older, we're supposed to then love others. And then comes this moment where we kind of venture out of the household love and we go searching for romantic love. And that's when everything gets vulnerable. Because some of us have said, I love you to someone who said, oh, that's nice. Some of you are really careful with the words, I love you. Some of you have used the words, I love you, to manipulate. 13-year-old me told every little girl he loved her because she was doing my homework, she was helping me out. You know, girl, I love you. That wasn't love. And as you grow in love with one other person, one day you have children of your own to love and repeat the process, and so it goes. But that is not many of our story. Most of us, somewhere in the line, the chain was broken, there was an interruption to the process, and the masterpiece we hoped would come together was ruined or marred or wrecked. And so Paul is hoping to pick up your pieces this morning and remind you of this simple truth. Yes, you are called to love. Yes, you are even called to love brothers and sisters who are sometimes difficult, but it is because you are loved more than you know. Your earthly father may have left a lot of things unsaid or undone, but your heavenly Father, He has told you over and over and over and over that He loves you and to not be afraid. He has done so much before you were even born to show you His love for you. We're going to begin in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 1. We'll just read the first 2 verses to get started. Paul says, "Therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children." Have you ever noticed that children who are raised in a loving environment want nothing more than to be like their mother or like their father? When they have received healthy love, they want to look like dad. They want to dress like dad. They want to be with dad. And your heavenly Father calls you to imitate Him. Now, I want you to remember, this is the creator of the universe. I can't create a universe. This is the God of all power and all might. He can heal. He can bring back the dead to life. And He calls me to imitate Him. Now, even in the word imitate, He knows we can't do the things He does, but we are to be like Him, as before He calls us to love, as beloved children. Eugene Peterson said of this passage, it's interesting that we are going to see love as a verb, love as a noun, and love as an adjective. We are going to be called love, we're going to be called to love, and then we're going to be called to walk that love out. Verse 2, and walk in love. As Christ loved us and gave Himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. I just want to share with you 4 real quick lies that we all tend to believe about love. Lie number 1, I just need to say I love you. So many people believe that love is just something you say to someone. Love is just something you put in your commitment or vow to someone. The first lie that most people fall victim to is, I just need to say I love you. If I say I love you, hey, I love you. If I just tell God I love Him, I love Him. There are a lot of Christians who pray often and say often, God, I love you, and it means little to nothing because they don't walk in love. You may want to love God. You may even like God. You may like the idea of God. But the problem is, when we are not imitating God, we tend to imitate what we think God is or we want God to be. If we were honest, our prayer would be not, God, I love you. God, I love who I want you to be. God, I love the version of you that I have edited out of the scriptures. I've taken the passages where I like these things about you and I emphasize that. I worship in there. I read in there. I do my devotions in there. But the passages that I don't like or confuse me or confound me or make me a little unsettled, those I don't like, God. So I like the part of you that I like, and so therefore, God, I like part of you. Can you imagine if your husband came home, said to you, I love X, Y, and Z about you, but A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, it is a real problem, and I don't like that at all. None of us would ever say it, but we do tend to say it with our actions. And we tend to do it to the Lord like this. We pray for God to be like us, more than we ask God to make us like Him. God, give me all these things because I want you, God, to reward my greed. God, judge those people who've wronged me because I don't want grace for them like for me. I want judgment because I want to be God. And I want you to be God like I want you to be God, God. God, forgive me for my trespasses, but anybody that wrongs me, God, I want you to strike them quickly. Because, God, I want you to be God like me, and a God that's like me would always bless me, but always curse others. Well, you don't love God. You love your version of God. And this is why the Lord has given us scriptures full of stories and accounts and chapters and verses that show us God is not like we want him to be sometimes. He's not quick, sometimes he's slow. He's patient. He's merciful to people we wouldn't want to offer mercy to. He does things in ways that draw out of us humility, draw out of us patience, draw out of us a death to our pride, and that is no fun. Let's read Ephesians 5:1-2 again. Therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. The second lie that most of us fall victim to, lie number 2, is, well, love is just a feeling. How could I love God if I don't feel it? If I don't just, I gotta lean into my feelings. Paul doesn't say here, wait until you feel like it. He says, be imitators of God and walk in love on the days you don't feel like it. I'm so glad you're in the house of the Lord this morning, because I'm sure that, like me, you probably woke up and maybe your body didn't feel like getting out of bed this morning. When Pastor Kevin had us sit down, I was sitting in a section and there was some people around me. I won't point anybody out. And as I sat down, I went, oh. And as they sat down, they went, oh. I was like, this is the middle-aged section. We all sit down and go, oh. Our bodies are getting old. You may not always feel like going to church. You may not always feel like reading the Word. You may not always feel like worshiping the Lord. You may not always feel like walking in love. But this is what Paul calls us to. And I'm afraid a lot of Christians, they're just waiting for a feeling. Well, if I feel like it, I'll go to group. If I feel like it, I'll serve others. If I feel like it, I'll be generous. If I feel like it, I'll walk in love. You ain't never going to feel like it. Because I don't ever feel like it, and neither do you. Do you know what we often feel like? Getting ours. Getting even. Letting everybody know how important we are. Making other people feel small. Saying things that make us feel better by making other people feel small. That always feels good for a moment. You know what I rarely feel like doing? Imitating God as Christ gave himself up for others. I don't often feel like just giving of myself for others, because I don't know if you know this about others, they tend to be takers. And Paul knew that, and he said, this is how we're to live, this is how we're to be. Love lie number 3, I got to move quick, is, well, maybe love doesn't matter that much. You haven't read the Bible if you don't believe that love matters. I'll just lean into just doing what's right. Who cares if I have love in the foundation of what I'm doing? Well, the point of this passage is that love is livable. It's not just knowable. It's not just something you experience. It's something we're called to live out. It's the basis of our salvation. It's core to who God describes himself to be. He says, I am love, for God so loved the world. It's everywhere in the scriptures. And love makes all the difference in the world, by the way. Love turns a job into a career. Love transforms a house that most people would drive by and not give second thought to into a home. There are homes right now that were you to drive by them, everyone else would find them who cares? It's just another house. But to you, it's a house that matters because it was your grandparents' house, it was your parents' house, it was your auntie's house, it was your uncle's house. It was a place where there was love, and love made all the difference. It wasn't the square footage. It wasn't the style of the house. It wasn't how updated or unupdated the house was. It wasn't if it had new bathrooms or a new kitchen. It was that place was permeated with love. And every time you smell a house like that house, you have a feeling come over you because your mind takes you back to a place where there was love. Love can even save a life. How many people, when close to taking their own life or thinking there was no meaning in their life, when someone came along and loved them, not talked down to them, not just told them vain ideas of cliches, but loved them. Love line number 4. Well, sounds like love's pretty important. So as long as I love, maybe I can do what I want. Paul's actually going to address that in the very next little section. But before we get there, I want you to understand that this is never how love works. Love is never permission. When God says he loves you, that doesn't mean you can do what you want. When God calls you to love, it doesn't mean if you just slap love on it that you can do whatever you want. This doesn't work logically. If someone were to say to you, I love you, and therefore I'm going to do what I want, no, you really love you. You don't love me. So I just want to say this and then I'll move on. Don't say you love the Lord if you won't live your love out for the Lord. This is where a lot of us, we get into this mindset of, well, as long as I name it and claim it, I love the Lord. Stop saying that. Stop telling your coworkers you love the Lord when you curse his name every time something doesn't go your way. Stop telling your neighbors that you love the Lord, but they see your car in the driveway every single Sunday because you're just busy. Things have gotten out of hand. I don't know what's going on. I can't make it to the house of the Lord. Stop saying you love this guy if you won't live it out. Stop saying you love the Lord if you won't honor him in your personal life, in your family life, in every area of your life. If you just be honest, you like the Lord. You like the stories. You like the Sunday school stuff. You like the Bible. You like church, but you don't love the Lord. If you love the Lord, you're going to live it out. And it's not lived out in this cliche, well, I just love everybody. It's backed up with how you treat the most difficult, hard to get along with, people who stab you in the back, people who don't like to be around you, people that you find disgusting. God says, those are the people I want you to love. That's why Jesus tells a story about a Samaritan, and every Hebrew was like, ugh. They threw up in their mouth a little bit. And he says, which one was the neighbor? They couldn't bring themselves to say Samaritan, the one who helped him. They couldn't say it. But if you ask them, no, we're loving. No, you're not. You have a whole bracket of people that you will not love. And then Paul makes a jarring statement in verse 3 that at first glance you're like, whoa, we just took a turn from love to something. No, they're tied together. Some of you are already reading ahead of me. It gets tight here. Verse 3, but sexual immorality and all impurity and covetousness must not even be named among you as is proper among saints. Verse 4, let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talk, nor crude joking, which are out of place, but instead let there be thanksgiving. For you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral, impure, or who is covetous, that is, an idolater, has no inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. You need to understand, love is a beautiful gift from God, but our love can be corrupted. That's what this passage is all about. He names a few things. He starts off with sexual immorality, and you're like, what does sexual immorality have to do with this? Paul warns against the corruption of love by fornication, and here's why. Because fornication is love reduced to sexual activity. It's actions without emotions. It's sleeping with someone, not because you love them or will commit to them, but because you want satisfaction. And then he mentions covetousness and idolatry. Why are these tied together? Because covetousness is when you say, I want things more than I want God. And fornication is when you say, I want satisfaction sexually more than anything else. And we live in a generation that has robbed the meaning of love. Love, reduced to sex, always depersonalizes and focuses on consumption and how many partners. It ultimately destroys intimacy. Do you want to know why our church, like every church, encourages and teaches and admonishes our young students, our teenagers, to be sexually pure? Because we want them to be sexually whole in their marriage one day. We want to protect their ability to be intimate with one partner. Now, God can forgive, and if you're here this morning and you've had multiple partners, God forgives, God redeems. But make no mistake about it, the scriptures give for us an outline of how to be sexually pure and sexually whole, and it's one man and one woman inside of one marriage. Why? Because God's a prude? No, because we actually know now. We have the science, we have the psychology, we have all of the stats to back it up. That is the most healthy and whole thing for you. You were never created to attach yourself in that way to multiple people. And so, I found this interesting writing by this man named Bernard of Clairvaux, a 12th century believer who was in the midst of a 12th century revival of it was infatuation with sex. Everything was all about sex. And so he noticed that love was being degraded into just physical acts, and he knew that is not the love that we are called to. And so he wrote about the 4 degrees of love that every human is intended to understand. And every human understands the first degree of love. The first degree of love is always love of self for self's sake. The love of self for self's sake. That's when you are completely self-centered. I've got things to deal with. I want to be loved, and so you love yourself and you do things for yourself, but often level one, it peaks out in your 20s when you realize, well, I can't do everything. I can't satisfy myself. And even if I have multiple partners, or even if I have a spouse who loves me, like there's still this emptiness. And so you move on from just loving yourself to there must be more, and you begin to love God for self's sake. You turn to a higher power. You're like, I need to turn over a new leaf. I need some revelation. I need some new experience with God, with the universe, with the Creator, with something. And you start looking for God, but not for God's sake, but for yourself's sake. So you turn toward the heavens and look for this God to love. Quickly, if you actually find God and you begin worshiping Him and knowing Him and loving Him, you realize your selfishness and you begin to love God for God's sake. You realize how mighty, how awesome, how wonderful, how good He is. And most of us settle in here. I love God for God's sake. But Bernard said that the fourth degree of love is where God begins to transform us and we go back to love of self, but in a new way. Love of self for God's sake. Now, this is not the idolization of self. This is the understanding that I am loved. As Paul would say, I am beloved. God made me in the image of God. He has a plan for me and a purpose for me, and I'm not the center of the universe, but I'm loved by the Creator God. He sent His Son to die for me. And this leads us to whole and complete understanding of our lives. We now look at our lives differently. It's not that we're protecting ourselves because it's all about us. We're trying to protect what God has placed in us. We're trying to pass on the faith that Jesus offers us. It's a long book that he wrote on the topic, and he mentioned that the fourth degree is so hard to get to because of our inconsistencies with love and how often we've been hurt by love. Because love is hard, and most of us, a lot of our failures are in our love lives, typically by our middle age, whether we're married or not, we tend to give up on love. Romantic love, the love they talk about at church. And we tend to believe that's just spiritual talk, or that's just somebody romanticizing things. Yeah, young people, they might have love, but they'll grow out of it. And then we focus on things we have a little more control over, our business, our bodies, whatever we're working on. Because this generation, like so many that have gone before, has traded in love for sex, intimacy for satisfaction. It's easy for us to get jaded as Christians and say, yeah, maybe love just isn't possible. Romantic love, love for the brother, love for the sister. Paul has given us a framework for how to grow, build, and lean into love. He called us to walk in love. This morning you have a church. If this isn't your home church, if it's your first time, welcome. We're glad that you're here, but I hope you will find a home church, whether it's ours or another church. The church offers you a place to practice love. The reason we get into small groups isn't just because we like being in smaller rooms. I don't like small rooms. I'm very uncomfortable with less than 20 people in the room. The reason we get into small groups is so that we can know people and people can know us, and we can practice loving people who sometimes say things we don't like, who sometimes disagree with us. It's easy to love our family. Well, most of the time. It's a bit of a stretch to love people who are raised different than you, who don't look like you, they don't vote like you, they don't think like you. And this is where we practice love. Our home is certainly where we practice love, but so is the community, whether it's through Adopt-A-Block, our first Saturday of the month outreach program, or serving others inside your church community. We give of ourselves to practice love. I've got to wrap it up. Today is Grandparents' Day, and I'd like to share with you a picture of my wife's grandparents and a picture of my grandparents. Grandparents' Day is one of our favorite Sundays of the year. We love honoring the grandparents in our house. These are my wife's grandparents. They both passed on and in heaven. And then on the next slide, you'll see a picture of my grandparents. And we're pretty sure that's me. Yeah. That's my grandparents holding me. They're seventh of what would be 16 grandchildren. And I just want to focus this morning as I wrap up. Our grandparents showed us a love, loved us in such a way where we knew they weren't just saying it, they modeled it, they lived it. I'll tell you two stories and I'm done. My wife's grandfather was a believer. As a matter of fact, my wife's grandfather, he was at the church when my grandfather became the pastor of that church. He had been there a long time. My wife's grandfather was a bit more quiet. He would teach Sunday school. He was involved in the ministry, a deacon, a leader, but never an upfront guy. But his love for the Lord permeated every area of his life. Every single morning, my wife grew up next door to her grandparents. She remembers him sitting on the front porch with a big, thick Bible and his pen, reading the Word. Gramps didn't just say he loved the Lord. He lived it out. With his relationships with others, his relationship with his family, his relationships inside of his church community. As far as we know, there was never anybody who had a fight or a disagreement or a bad blood, whatever, feud with Gramps, because he was just one of those people he learned to love and love well. My grandfather was the pastor of the church. In some ways, a polar opposite of Gramps. Up front, loud, in your face. My grandfather preached for 30 years, preached hard. I spent many afternoons with my grandfather, sometimes fishing, sometimes in his home. There are a lot of preachers who say a lot of things. We know now there were a lot of preachers and have been and will be a lot of preachers who preach one thing but live a different way. Often the case, unfortunately. My grandfather was hardline on everything. No shorts on boys, no pants on women, you name it, he was tight. And I'll say this, he was consistent. There's nothing I ever heard my grandfather preach that he didn't back up, that he didn't live out. He spent most Saturday nights on the phone for hours, calling everybody he knew that wasn't a believer. Are you going to be at church tomorrow? I'd love for you to be there. Jesus loves you. He'd hang up and make another call. On Monday morning, he'd call whoever wasn't there. My grandfather believed hell and heaven were real, and it was our job to convince and plead and cry with everybody we could to get them into heaven. He believed what the Bible said, and he lived it out. He loved Jesus, and he wanted everybody else to love him too. Our grandfathers are gone, but their love lives on because of what they passed on. That time is gone. It's now our turn to be faithful in how we teach, preach, live, and walk out the love that God gave us, offered to us, and calls us to model.